Hello everyone, I'm Thomas, and today we're going to be going over how to use the GitHub Desktop client to create and manipulate a Git repository. This video is part 1 of a 2-part tutorial series covering the installation and basic functionality of the client. A lot of what we do through the client can also be done on GitHub's website, but for today we'll focus on using the client. Now, let's get into it. First things first, let's get GitHub Desktop set up on your computer. This process works whether you're on a Mac or using a Windows PC. Go to github.com and create a free account. This will give you access to their repository hosting services. After you've created your account, go to Google and type in GitHub Desktop. Then, click I'm feeling lucky. No one uses that button, so show it some love. Then, just click that big purple download button and run the installer. Now that you're all set up, let's take a look at the desktop app. I'm personally a fan of using dark mode in applications, so let's get that changed first. Go ahead and click on File in the upper left-hand corner, and then click on Options. In the pop-up, click on the Appearance tab. There, you'll have the choice to select your theme for the app. And now, we're all set to make our repo. Click on File again, then click New Repository. The name should be something related to whatever your project has to do with. In this case, I'm making a Hello World program in C++, so I've named it Hello World. The underscore is added because you can't have spaces in a repo name. You can also add a description, which is useful for other people looking at your repo or for you to look back on previous projects to easily know what's in it. Initializing with a README creates a README file in the repo that you can edit. The git ignore section is actually very important, so don't ignore it. Depending on what you're doing, you'll want a different git ignore file in your repo. This file basically tells the client to ignore any changes in certain file types. In my case, with Visual Studio 2019, there are a lot of files that get changed just by opening the project that I don't want to deal with managing through version control. If I have to commit changes to them every time I open the program, then the repo will fill up with useless copies of the files. So for my purposes, I chose Visual Studio. The license section relates to which license you're claiming your work under. If you want to know more, check the description. Finally, click here and you're good to go. You've now created a local repository which only exists on your computer. Let's publish it to the server, creating a remote repository from a copy of this one. Click on either publish button and fill out the information for how it will appear on the site. This section is for privacy options. A public repo will be visible to anyone through a Google or GitHub search. Private repositories are only visible to those you give access to. With that, you're good to go. Head over to github.com, hit refresh, and you can now see your repo sitting on the GitHub servers. Now that we've got our repo, let's put things in it. I've created a C++ Visual Studio project and added it to the local repo folder by dragging and dropping it in through Windows Explorer. I opened the project and added a line of code that prints Hello World to the screen when run. Moving over to the desktop app, you can see that there are some changes on the screen. The column on the left shows the files that have been changed, with matching icons to show how the files were affected. Green means they were added, yellow means they were edited, and red means they were deleted. The tick box next to each file represents if that change will be part of the commit. This means that if you don't want some changes to be added to the commit history, they don't have to be. You can also right-click on a file and select Discard Changes to undo the changes made to that file and revert it back to its last stable version in the commit history. This undoes the changes that were made. If you get an error like this, it most likely means the file whose changes you're attempting to discard is open in another program. Now that your files are ready, let's give this commit a meaningful title, matching description, and click Commit in the bottom left. Now, we get to push the changes to the remote repo. Okay, but what is pushing? With Git, to edit the local repo's commit history, you make a commit. To edit the remote repo on the server, however, you push your local commit history to the servers, adding your local changes. It's basically committing to the remote repo. We can now go on to github.com and see that the files have been successfully added and the contents of the C++ file match the copy in our local repo. So a common question at this point is, how do I get changes that other people have made to the remote repo? That's where the Fetch button in the upper right-hand corner comes into play. The Fetch button has two functionalities, Fetch and Pull. Fetching is the process of downloading the commit history from the remote repo to your local repo. This lets you see what everyone else has been working on and what differences there are between your repo and the servers. If you want these changes implemented on your local repo, you then have to click the Fetch button again, which has now become the Pull button. Pulling is basically the process of implementing these changes, which will update your local repo to match the remote repo. It's very important to fetch often so that you can get any important updates. So GitHub says you've edited a file, but you can't remember what you've changed. Is there a way to easily see differences in the files? Yes there is. When GitHub senses changes in the local repo, it will display the files that were edited under the Changes tab in the column on the left. If you click on one of these files, you then get a visual in the center of the app of what changes were made. Red lines mean that a line of code is removed, and green means that one was added. In this case, I've edited the Hello World statement, which GitHub believes to be deleting it and adding in a changed line, Hello World 2 Electric Boogaloo. And since I want this change, let's give it a meaningful commit title, description, commit, and push the changes out. I think that's enough for today. Next time, we'll finish off with part 2 of this tutorial by going over how to use branches, reverting, and other useful features. Until then, have a good one.